Welcome back to Get the Check. I'm Maya.
I'm Annika.
I'm Priya.
And today we have some fun stories, and this time we don't have AI, which made me a little happy because I wanted to take a break from it for a week.
We'll be back next week, though. Don't worry.
Yeah, we're going to cover GPT-5 next week. Oh, and we're going to cover a cool Anthropic research paper and have someone on.
Yeah.
Anyways, back to the topics at hand. First, we're going to be covering Neuralink. They've been in the news recently, so they're testing their chips in a UK clinical study, and they've also been collaborating on a smart bionic eye. We're going to be covering those stories and then doing a little bit of a deep dive into the history of their product because we've never covered them before.
Back to our roots.
Yeah. And then we're also going to be doing a generic economy update. So the Fed met last week and didn't raise rates, and there was also a jobs report that's was a little shocking, maybe. The more shocking thing was that Trump actually fired the head of the Bureau of Labor Statistics because of his frustration with how the job report came out.
Yeah, that was really shocking.
So starting with Neuralink, which is a pretty cool topic because it's a brain computing interface, right?
Yeah, BCI space.
The BCI space, obviously an Elon Musk company. They have been in the news recently for two different trials that they've announced. The first one is a clinical study in Great Britain related to their Neuralink chip and how it is helping patients that have neurodegenerative conditions like ALS or some type of paralysis. And basically it lets patients control digital and physical tools with their mind. And then the other one is separate but very related. They're working on a smart bionic eye, and they're partnering with researchers from the University of California, Santa Barbara, to basically use AI to give blind people scene awareness or basically eyesight.
Yeah.
In September of last year, they got a breakthrough device designation from the FDA. Mm-hmm. And so the FDA made it very clear that this doesn't mean that they're saying it's safe, but it basically is a designation that a product can get that means that this has the potential to do so much good and be such a breakthrough technology that we're basically going to prioritize getting it approved, assuming the company can show they're meeting the FDA's bar. And they are starting this trial to basically show that. And the way the technology works is it uses a video camera to capture a bunch of visual information, and then it would be attached to a headset or glasses. And it kind of reminded me of when we talked about Tesla's AVs and how they're very dependent on camera technology for sight, because this is basically the same idea, but instead of helping a car see, you're helping a human see. So it's pretty cool. And the brain implant sends signals from the cameras directly to your neurons. And that's how people see. And then the last part of this is basically there is some pushback from professors that say that maybe this would be a little helpful to briefly see shapes and stuff, but it's not going to be revolutionary, versus Elon Musk, who's basically claiming that blindness will be a thing of the past in the next 10-ish years. It hasn't been tested on a human patient yet, but they're saying that by the end of the year they think it will be.
That's pretty crazy because I feel Neuralink's barely even been tested on human patients.
And the future idea, or what it'll evolve into, is supposed to be a superhuman vision, which includes infrared and the ultraviolet spectrum.
Yeah, that part is crazy because it's even someone with 20/20 vision could theoretically opt to use this to get additional vision.
So it's glasses? Is that what you said?
Yeah, it would either be glasses or a headset.
Okay.
But theoretically, and we'll get into Neuralink, but theoretically I feel it maybe could just work through Neuralink long term, but I'm not sure.
Yeah, because right now they haven't figured out how to access the visual cortex of your brain. But if they were able to do that, then they could send signals to it.
And they need somewhere to put the video camera. So that's why it's glasses or a headset right now.
That makes sense.
Because that's where the video cameras are. But yeah, we can go more into just our deep dive on Neuralink and the background of the company.
So Neuralink develops these brain-computer interfaces, which have been around for a while because there's invasive and non-invasive types of BCIs, but Neuralink specifically is invasive, which is a lot more dangerous because it requires surgery and actually implementation into the brain instead of some sort of headset you're wearing on top. And their goal is that you implant these chips in your brain, and that enables direct communication between your brain and an external device. So that could be prosthetics, it could be a computer. In the future, it might be something that we don't even know about right now. And in general, it was started to treat neurological disorders like paralysis or blindness. But with every Elon company, there's always this larger, grander vision.
I was watching the Elon presentation, and he talks a lot about human bandwidth output. So essentially we are physically limited by our touch and our speech. So before we had computers, at least we were limited by speech and like writing and like being able to actually write, and then getting computers and like being able to type, we were able to type a little bit faster and then maybe produce a little bit more information. And so if you want to measure the amount of information we can produce, it's around 86,000 bits of output per day, which is quite small if you think about like the size of the internet or the size of a video. And the other thing is like your input that you're taking in is actually quite larger than your output, because if you imagine like the video you're watching every single day, which is just experiencing life, you're probably consuming around like megabits worth of information. And so what he's trying to say is that we are physically limited about the information that we can intake and output. And so the idea is that the Neuralink chip is going to be the general platform for increasing the input and output of your brain. And therefore, we as human beings can become a lot more efficient. So like, when you're having an argument and you're trying to explain your side, if you were to communicate your thoughts, maybe you could communicate like all the nuanced layers of like how you're truly feeling, and the other person could, just understand you right away, rather than trying to use words and like inferring the tones off of your body language.
I feel like I get so overstimulated.
Yeah.
That sounds like a lot.
It is a lot. So that's kind of like the very long version of like how you might interact with humans. And then similarly to like how you might interact with technology, it's just like you are an enhanced like superhuman in a sense, and it's like you being a cyborg. But then
I was just gonna say there's like interesting discourse on like what being a cyborg even means, because like if you start looking at your screen time across like your work computer and your phone in a day, like the typical person that we like talk to and know is probably approaching like 80%, if not more sometimes, of like hours awake are looking at a screen.
Yeah.
Unless it's like a Saturday and you go sit in a park. So it's like we can say that like this idea of being cyborgs is like so foreign to us, but it's not really.
Yeah.
And Elon basically sees the phone as like an inefficient way to be cyborgs.
Yeah.
And this is like an efficient way. I want to contextualize the like bits thing, because like it is like exactly what you said, but then like they basically like AI systems communicate at 1 trillion bits per second, and humans communicate at 39 bits per second, which is like, I can't even like conceptualize the difference between that. If we had Neuralink, it increases our bits per second and increases our ability to be integrated with AI, which like, it's almost like these technologists like Peter Thiel and Elon Musk like think that like AI overtaking us is inevitable, and this is like our fighting chance. It's like the vibe I get.
I guess I kind of see that. But yeah, so when they talk about this technology in their presentations, they always say that they want to be transparent. They want to be very open about what they're doing, and that like you're not going to see everyone just have a Neuralink chip like one day. Like it'll be a gradual rollout. The idea is that like over time we will be used to like people having Neuralink chips because they have some sort of disability, and it helps them overcome that disability. And then that kind of transitions to like a normal person, not that anyone's really normal, but like someone who doesn't really have a disability having a chip that like enhances their life and like helps them use and interact with technology, and then that just gets expanded on and expanded on. They talk about Moore's law in relation to Neuralink, where as the Neuralink chip gets better and better, like your human bandwidth should also scale like Moore's law, where it's like exponential in terms of the amount of information you both consume and produce.
Yeah, that makes sense. And it makes sense that it wouldn't be similar to like AI frontier models that we're seeing, for example, because it involves humans and the brain. And I feel like there's so much of the brain that's unmapped today already. Like there's so much we don't know about it, that not only would you have to like do the trials on humans and like prove out the concept, but there's also so much we still have to learn about the human body and the brain.
Yeah. And speaking of that, I feel like we should kind of explain how it works, because before I looked into this, I was really confused. Like I understand it's kind of like a quarter size thing that goes into your brain, but I looked more into like the actual way that it happens. And basically they drill a hole in your skull and then like put it in your brain, and like they originally were putting it, I think, like 3 centimeters deep, and now it's closer to 5 centimeters deep. And they found that the deeper it is in your brain, obviously that's like a riskier procedure or like harder to achieve, but it does like make it more effective.
I think it's like it has to do with how close you are to the actual signal itself, because when you have like an EEG cap, for example, you still are getting signal from the same brain waves, but because it has to go through all of these layers. I saw this example online. It was basically like it's like whispering through a door, because you have to go through all of these layers versus just being on the other side of that door. And so because they're so deep into your brain, they're able to get that signal with
Much
a lot
stronger.
less noise.
Like
Exactly.
read it strong. Okay,
That makes sense.
So that's like why it's better for it to be deeper.
Yeah.
Also on the implant, they have like over 1,000 electrodes that like record these neurons. They were saying that they should have like 6,000, and by the end of next year they should have like 16,000, and this basically just gives like more channels into your brain, and then those can detect the neural activity that's happening. And then because the signals are really noisy, basically within the chip they have these processors that clean it and digitize it, and then that sends a signal back to a computer, and they do that wirelessly. And then Neuralink has like their own models. I'm sure it's the same as like Elon's using for other things as well. And they've trained that to map to brain signals and measure intent. So they can like find what the intent is using these models and then translate that to like an action that's taken, which is like really crazy.
Yeah, it's really cool because like in the first paralyzed patient they worked with, which was in 2024, and his name is Noland Arbaugh. When they first like put it in his brain and he like woke up, he's completely paralyzed. But he'd like think in his brain like, I have the intent to like lift my pointer finger, and then that signal would show up in the model, which is like basically a computer. Like, and like each of his fingers, like they could figure out like which finger gave the strongest signal, and then they used that as like his cursor. So like he like thinks to like use that finger the same way like we use our pointer finger.
Yeah, and it's crazy because like these models were trained based on like completely animal data. So like, because how else are you going to try to map like intent of something to an action that's taken? And so they used like pigs and mice, I think, and then eventually moved on to monkeys to like get all of this data to like make these models in the first place.
Yeah, and they started in like 2017, and then Neuralink was first put into human in 2024, which honestly I feel like to me is a pretty fast timeline. Like 7 years to go from like starting to understand animal brainwaves to literally having completely decoded the human brain.
Well, even from like the first patient to the most recent patient, like the onboarding time for the first patient took like days to like basically sync up the chip and like the brain signals to the actual actions. And now the onboarding process is less than 15 minutes. And they showed like
crazy.
It's insane because they showed the like video of like the onboarding process, and it's like pretty similar to like the AR VR onboarding process where you like look left and then you look right and you like try to look at the thing that it's like reading your eye. So it's the same thing. It's like thumbs up, thumbs down, or like wave and stuff like that. And so it seems completely normal. And then by the end of it, you literally can like move your hand virtually.
Yeah. So basically it's like that implant. There's a surgical robot that puts it in your brain because like the threads you're talking about are like thinner than human hair. So that's why they need a robot to do it. And I do think like the fact that it's a robot also makes it more scalable. And Elon clearly has like plans to like commercialize and monetize this to the general public. And I feel like when you think about how he's approaching this, he's like approaching it in a way that it's scalable from day one.
Yeah, it also makes it a lot safer to have a robot do it because they don't need to do like as big of an incision, and they can like just use the robot and it'll be precise every single time, as opposed to a human where there's more room for error.
Yeah,
like,
I'd rather a robot do it on me than a human.
My first question was like, why, if you were starting a business and you wanted to like make BCIs, like why would you rely on also making a robot? Because that's a whole nother like thing to make and system and team to have. And then it's like, oh, the only way that they could actually make the chip so successful is if they had the robot to like place the little threads, because a human would never be able to have that sort of precision. And that's when I was like, wow, like
Elon's also like always down to like verticalize.
Always down to verticalize. That is true.
And I read this like really long interview with the first patient that ever had Neuralink, and I'm not like Elon Musk fanboy, like I feel like I'm like not a huge Elon Musk defender, but it honestly was like kind of moving. Well, it was moving. Like, it was like he was like completely paralyzed from the neck down. Hearing him talk about the technology, he was like, I want this for like as long as possible so I can like make a difference in other people's lives. And like it completely changed my life. And he was just talking about how he was so dependent on his parents and his family for every single thing, and he just like felt like a burden. And he was like, now I'm not, and like in the future I might have like an Optimus robot that can like do things for me, like if I need to go get food from the kitchen, like the robot will do that, and like my Neuralink will tell the Optimus robot to do that. And then if I need to go somewhere, he was like, getting from point A to B is like a really difficult thing for me. And that's just like, I don't know, he's talking about it in a philosophical sense. Like as a human, that's like a big part of what makes you you. Like you have the independence to do that. And he was like, oh, like in the future, like a Tesla car will just like pick me up.
Yeah. And this is like kind of tangential but related. The idea that Elon talks about is like, what about you is you? Like you can always replace your heart, for example, because you can have open heart surgery and get a donor, or you can replace your kidneys. And like the only thing you can't replace is your brain.
The part that I thought was like also really crazy about this is like how they've been able to like map intent. Because I was talking to Pri about this when we were researching, and it's like my brain knows the difference between like an intrusive thought I have to like throw my computer across the room and like actually doing it, and like so does Neuralink. Like it's basically a complete mind reader.
But it also is like tapped into like certain parts of the brain. So like they've figured out which parts of the brain to target to get the information that they need. It doesn't know your entire brain. It knows like the pieces that we're like giving it access to, kind of. And I feel like if we actually gave it our entire brains, it would have no idea what to do.
Because like, well, I'm not saying it's like reading every thought in your brain, but it's like reading some of your brain, which makes it a mind reader in my book.
My stomach just starts turning thinking about like Black Mirror episodes when we start talking about this.
There literally was a Black Mirror episode about this. It was like the first episode of the most recent season, and it was like a very similar concept where she basically had a brain tumor, and to live, this company was like, oh, we'll do this surgery for you for free, and we'll like implant this into your brain, and then all you have to do is pay like a monthly subscription fee. She ends up doing it because it like saves her life and she would have died otherwise. And they end up doing it, and they have to pay, and they like aren't a well-off family, and so they're paying the subscription, and over time it becomes like a bigger and bigger deal, and they start sending her ads. So like literally she'll be talking to someone, like let's say I'm talking to Annika about like lip liner, for example. In the middle of our conversation, I'll just like blurt out an ad to her.
She'll just be like, Hailey Bieber's new road like line is like so lip trippy. Liners. And then they couldn't even afford that, right?
Yeah, and well, so they could afford the ad version like barely.
Oh,
but if you wanted like an ad-free version, it was like even more expensive. And then the husband like goes down this like dark path of like trying to afford these things for her, and so he starts like pulling out his teeth and like doing these crazy
like,
things.
On a website online where they like ask him to start doing things in exchange for money, like a weird like only. I'm not gonna say the word because we get content mod. And so he does like all these like things, like it's like pull out a tooth, like drink like your and like all these things, and like he still can't like make the money. So I think she like offs herself.
Well, like she tells him to kill her. And then he does. Oh. Because they were both like, we're both like really crushed.
But actually it's like not entirely that far-fetched, because like in this whole deep dive that we were doing on Neuralink, we'll get into the market, but there's like actually a lot of competitors in this market. Neuralink's just like by far the most talked about.
But it's not even the most far along.
It's not the most far along in terms of people that have it. And like some of the other ones had like more unstable funding, which like makes sense because this is basically like pre-product research, and not all of these companies have like an Elon Musk backing them, and like I don't know, the DOD and a bunch of other investors, and they have like gone out of business while there's people that have the chip in their head.
So then like what happens?
I think you're just turning the chip off.
The chip gets turned off, but it's like you're like turning up, like the way one of the women described it was she was like, they like basically turned a part of me off. Which makes sense. Like
it does make sense.
Like the implication of someone of it.
If you're paralyzed and like the only way you can communicate with people around you is like
this device or whatever. Technology.
Then,
that is crazy.
And it's not even like it's a company's doing something so unethical. Like they just went bankrupt. And like she signed on fully knowing that was a possibility. It just like sucks. And beyond this, like Black Mirror episode and situations where people have had like the company turn the chip off from like competitors, there's also other examples of like, for example, China with like some of their workers is using AI like augmented helmets, and they've been monitoring workers' brainwaves. There's like articles about it, not a ton, but there's some articles online about how they're like understanding when workers are stressed during the day, when they're unproductive, and like obviously their PR answer is like we're using their brainwaves to like optimize their work, make sure they're healthy and happy, like make sure they're not overworked. But it's like obviously really scary. And there was an interesting Vox article about like how our brain is like our last frontier of privacy. Like the way you were talking about Elon being like, it's the only thing that makes us human. Other people are like, it's the only thing we have control over. Like,
Yeah.
Zuck has like farmed literally all of our personal data
Yeah.
besides like our thoughts that we've never vocalized or written.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Like, sure, you could have AI like predict that,
Yeah.
but like that's literally the last frontier of our privacy.
That's true.
Yeah.
Yeah. And when I was looking into the China example, that was something they said as well, because like right now they're using EEG caps, which like don't have great signal. So like while you can see what their different emotions are and stuff, you're not actually like close enough to the neurons to be able to like read any thoughts or translate that
it's
to
not
like
an
intent.
implant.
Exactly. Yeah. Because it's not an implant. But let's say that they did have Neuralink, then like in a place like China, you are literally getting thought policed, because like all of that data would be available to the government, and
It
then
can
you
be-
actually just have nothing.
Like, it can be easily weaponized.
Yeah.
So easily.
And like, okay, in 2014, which is so long ago, Florida State Police used brain fingerprinting tech from brainwave science in criminal investigations as basically a replacement for a polygraph. And there's like a couple articles on it online, and I have to think like the technology just wasn't there and the contract ended, because I feel like there'd be like a New York Times article or something where there isn't, but I know the contract was for sure signed. And that's just like really scary, because it's like theoretically like you could totally figure out like if someone like did a crime, like all
Yeah.
of these other things.
But I think it goes back to like what we have access to, because right now like they're specifically translating intent to action, not like your thoughts. Like they can't just like
Yeah.
put together what you're thinking.
They
So
can't
that's
put
not-
together sentences.
But they
or
can put
coherent.
together like emotions. But yeah, so there are like some more like societal concerns of like how this technology could be used. And I saw this TikTok this girl made that had like millions of likes, that basically like in Trump's big beautiful bill, there's like a line item for like wearable technology. And RFK has said that he wants like every American to have a wearable, of which like Neuralink would be like a logical wearable. Like
Yeah.
Neuralink is like one of the closest wearable companies to the administration. And then she was just talking about how like Neuralink's doing like more tests in Florida, and like I don't know, like I don't want to say conspiracy theory because she had like a good amount of evidence, but like it isn't any like concreteness to it. And like she was saying that in her video too, but like she was talking about how like a lot of the ICE like detention centers are like near where they're testing Neuralink, and at the same time like Florida's passing more like laissez-faire laws around like privacy with these things, and like your right to like sign off on like medical procedures. And like we know historically that like medical procedures have been done to people against their will by like the government. All of like the MK Ultra stuff that people said was like a conspiracy theory, and then it turns out they're doing it to people in jail. They were doing it to like literally like college students at like Harvard and stuff, I'm pretty sure too. So yeah, it's not like a huge take that I have or something, because like who knows, but it is kind of like scary to have that type of technology in the hands of someone that has like such an overarching other agenda.
Yeah,
I would
they were
say.
talking about it with like Alligator Alcatraz, because I remember when I was looking into that, that was like the detention center, the ICE detention center that was close to, where was it?
I don't know the exact city, but it's like in all these things are in Florida.
Yeah, and it's crazy because like they actually could just do it to anyone in there, and like who's gonna stop them?
It's also like if you put people in a concentration camp, you have, which like by the way, like when the Holocaust happened, like again, like a ton of medical procedures were done on all those people. Like anytime you have a concentration camp or like a group of people extremely oppressed, you usually do start like using them to experiment.
Yeah.
And it's like you could easily be like, hey, if you join our trial, like we'll let you out of this camp. Like I would do that. Like
Yeah.
I'd rather have a Neuralink than be like locked in a cage.
Yeah.
So it is like scary. I'm not saying they're doing that. It's just like
The sci-fi futures could be true.
it like reminds me of the Peter Thiel interview where they're like, "Oh, do you want the human race to survive?" And he's like, "I don't know." I think he is like saying, "I don't know" because of this. Like they all like talk about it in their interviews. Like even Alexander Wang was like, "I'm not gonna have a baby until Neuralink is good enough that everyone has one."
Yeah. I don't think it's 10 years for whatever Alex... And like, I think Alexander Wang will have a baby before then, but if he wants to have one.
They should have a call sheet market on if Alexander Wang will actually keep his word of not having a baby until it can be Neuralinked.
Wait, can't you propose markets on Kalshi?
Yeah, you can
it.
propose markets on call sheet now. We could propose that.
Yeah.
Oh, we could. Cool. Should we move on to competitors?
Yeah.
So yeah, we were talking about like the general BCI space, and there's a couple of ones that I wanted to touch on. One was Synchron.
Yeah, so Synchron has so far implanted devices in 10 people, which is more than Neuralink. And as of last year, they've raised $145 million. They have investors like Khosla Ventures, the DoD, Bezos, Gates, like top names.
Yeah. And they essentially use a less invasive method where they put the device in the bloodstream via the jugular vein. So it's like in your neck, kind of. It's more of an endovascular surgery rather
That
than
is so scary.
than an open brain surgery. But it's like, it's better for you.
So Elon once was like talking about how it could be like a neck thing, like also that. And then like the audience was like he was talking about it publicly, and then he's like, oh my God, like we're not like cutting people's heads off. Like, don't worry.
Wait, which one would you guys rather have?
The
Your
neck one.
jugular?
The neck one, yeah.
The neck one is like
It's
objectively
safer. Objectively
It's
safer.
just
But
like,
there's something about it.
yeah, but there's also something about getting your skull drilled into too.
Yeah. Wait, I definitely think it should just be the neck
You
one.
know, I think the reason why like the neck thing is like more perturbing is because there's like more empirical examples of like someone getting their
Dying
neck
because of it.
slit,
Yeah.
versus like we don't hear about like brains getting drilled into, so you're not really like visualizing it from like a ton of movie scenes. You know?
Yeah, I
what
know
I mean?
what you're saying.
Because like I've been watching Severance, and they have been showing those brain scenes, and it's like extremely off-putting. And the whole time I was watching Severance for the last season, I've been like, oh, this is so unrealistic.
And
And
now
then
you're like,
after this deep dive, I was like, oh my God, kill myself. I just don't even. Sometimes I'm like, I don't need to do a podcast and have this much information on the world. I can just live in blissful ignorance.
Yeah.
So back to Synchron, they're actually further ahead in both human trials and ability. They've implanted in 10 humans, and they've demonstrated the ability to control digital devices for like communication using technology at home. And so it's the first device that can actually control Apple Vision Pro via thoughts.
That's cool.
Which is like
That is
what
cool.
what we were talking about earlier. So for reference, when we were doing content planning, I was like, oh, what if Neuralink kind of just jumps the gun and for AR VR, and we never have to figure out eye tracking because we just figure out thought tracking, and then you like can just control your like VR headset with thought tracking, and then literally that's actually true. Like Synchron is able to do it. So I just thought that was cool. Yeah, obviously not offered at scale because like someone has to go and put the thing in you, but they are more further along. The idea though is that Neuralink, how do you explain it? Will be able to scale better to more abilities because they're focused on a brain implantation, which in theory should be able to like intersect unlock more brain signals, like read more brain signals, like we were talking about before. So
And the ability to like write to brain signals.
yeah, it's kind of like the classic like Elon thinking like 3 steps ahead, but doesn't really work. You know,
Yeah.
when we're thinking about Tesla versus Waymo, like Waymo actually works, Tesla doesn't, but then
Long term, it could all even out.
solving for camera technology should be better than not having LiDAR and having it be so expensive. But yeah, anyways.
And it
I thought
is
that was
kind
cool.
of similar because it is solving for camera technology again.
But yeah, so that's Synchron. Then there's also Precision Neuroscience, which was co-founded by Benjamin Rapport, a previous Neuralink co-founder.
Yeah, like all of the Neuralink founding
Yeah.
team has left. It's like 6 out of 8.
Yeah, I don't know if this is the most prominent
I think it is.
Neuralink.
It is.
It's probably the most prominent one. They have what they call layer 7 cortical interface, which is a thin, flexible, high channel count device that sits atop or just under the surface of the brain, so not as deep as Neuralinks. And they've received FDA clearance for 30-day patient implantation, but they're not really that far along in their clinical trials, obviously because they're a newer company, and they've raised $93 million. And then the final one is BlackRock Neurotech, which is one of the oldest technology companies and then has like a lot of experience of BCI, but they're kind of like the dinosaur in this space. And so they're not moving as fast. And like, I think probably have like more archaic takes or ways to do BCI and maybe not as cutting edge. I don't know too much about them, but basically as of today, Synchron is considered the most far ahead competitor.
And like the interviews of the Synchron founder are interesting too, because he basically says that like they're prioritizing like paralyzed patients, whereas like Elon's prioritizing a generalized solution, and that's like what accounts for a lot of the delta between their approaches.
I was curious about the whole like co-founders, all of the Neuralink co-founders kind of leaving and starting their own thing.
Isn't it because they didn't align with like the long-term vision?
Yeah, like the biggest stated reason is basically that like Musk was just pushing these deadlines that they didn't think were realistic, and like they felt like also in certain situations like he was making a decision to like not do it like the jugular way and like do it in the brain, even if like maybe for like the stated use case of like helping paralyzed people, like that didn't make the most sense. Yeah. And so I think it was the best way to summarize it would be like vision misalignment.
Yeah. It's kind of like, okay, do you take the opportunity to change lives today, or do you take the opportunity to change all of humanity faster at the like sorry
But I get what you're saying, but like you're saying like do you prioritize like
lives?
Do you prioritize helping people that have like actual ailments, like they're paralyzed and stuff today, or do you prioritize like the long-term future of humanity? I don't even think that's the trade-off, because I think like helping paralyzed patients, like I looked at some polls and it's like if you poll the public and you're like, do you think a paralyzed person should like get Neuralink, everyone's like yes. And like, are you fine testing on animals, are you fine like testing even on people? It's like, yeah, if like a paralyzed person like wants to sign up for Neuralink, like who am I to say no to that? But when you start talking about like a generalized commercialized solution, it's not like an agreed upon end goal that would benefit all of humanity. I think that's the issue.
In all of their presentations, they're like very upfront of like what their future vision is. And then he always ends the talk of like, and if you want to join, we're hiring smart people. I'm not telling you that because we need you or whatever. I'm just telling you like, come join our vision. We have a lot of funding. We're not running out of money. And we just want smart people to work on these hard problems.
Yeah, in a way, it reminds me of like the nucleus genomics difference of like them offering you a way to see the diseases your embryo will have that everyone's like, oh, sick. And then they're like, and also like pretty soon you can see like hair color, eye color, and IQ. And then everyone's like, oh, wait, like, I mean, yeah, like nucleus genomics isn't that effective at doing that right now, but it's kind of a similar thing where people are like, oh, wait, now like I'm not so sure.
I don't know if it's like super similar to nucleus genomics just because of the fact that you're essentially like nucleus genomics is never going to actually do gene editing. So it's like the furthest version of nucleus genomics is that you're just able to pick the best baby out of 20 babies, but you can't actually like gene edit them to like be anything different. Versus here, I feel like you actually could change people completely.
Yeah, I agree. I'm just saying like the comparison I'm trying to say is like when a questionable technology is clearly helping people avoid or fight like tragic things like Down syndrome, if you don't want a baby that has that, like ALS, paralysis, like those types of things, it's very easy to rally support. But then like when the same technology is applied to other spaces,
that's when people get really frustrated.
Like not even like comparing the impact of nucleus genomics and Neuralink. I think that they're just good examples of like things where like when they address disease, everyone's like clearly pro the technology. Yeah. And when it leaves the realm of disease, it like becomes controversial.
Yeah. Cool. But yeah, that's Neuralink for you.
Pretty crazy.
So moving on, Trump recently fired the commissioner of the Bureau of Labor Statistics after a weak job report. He basically believes that the numbers are rigged and that they're not true. And the monthly job report showed that there was weak hiring in July, and it was a large downward revision to job growth. And this is following the Fed meeting 2 days prior, where they decided to not cut rates and keep rates steady. People were on different sides of like the debate on whether or not we should keep rates steady or lower rates. And part of the reason for why you want to maybe lower rates is to stimulate jobs. So these two stories are like somewhat related, and we wanted to go over kind of like a look at the economy since the tariff situation that has been happening for the last 3 months and how it has affected us so far, and like what we're thinking is going to come in the next month. But yeah.
Yeah. So last Wednesday, they decided to keep rates the same. And this was the 5th consecutive meeting where rates have stayed the same. And Trump has been pushing really hard ever since he was elected into office that we need to lower rates, because if you lower interest rates, then you're in theory like stimulating the economy and people will spend more money. And this was the first time since 1993 where there was a split decision. So like a little context on how the Fed works. There's 12 members of the Federal Open Market Committee, and they determine like the U.S. monetary policy. So that's primarily just interest rates for us. They meet 8 times a year, and their 2 like main goals that they have to keep in mind is that they want to control inflation and maximize employment, and those like often go directly against each other. And so they basically are doing this like balancing act the entire time to keep the numbers at like what we want them to be. And so this time 2 people like double dissented basically, which means that like 2 people went against what the chair Jerome Powell like stated, which was that he wanted to keep rates the same, and they said they wanted to cut rates.
And they were both like Trump appointees, and it was the first time, you said the year, but it was the first time since what,
1993.
1993. Yeah. So like I feel like to me it kind of implies that like Trump's appointees were like more political picks than other presidents.
Yeah, they were appointed during his first term, and so they've like been in office for a while, but it's like humming up now because Jerome Powell and Trump are clearly like always fighting with each other, and Jerome Powell's term is over next May. And so one of the guys that dissented, his name was Christopher Waller, and apparently he's like the front runner for who could replace Jerome Powell. So it is definitely like a political statement that he dissented.
Yeah. And the reason for why they kept the rate the same is that the inflation is still above its 2% target. And so I think Jerome Powell is sticking to the fact that he wants to wait till it's below 2%, regardless of like the low unemployment rate, the slow in hiring, and the moderate growth in the first half of the year, given like the AI boom recently. And so this kind of makes sense because I think he's just trying to not jump the gun and stimulate the economy. And then as a result, you start to see this pressure from Trump onto Powell and being frustrated for like Powell's choices. And it's clear that Trump wants to show, hey, these tariffs are not really impacting the economy. And a large way to show that is that if the rates get cut, then you see some stimulus in the economy. And then you can kind of correlate that stimulus in the economy back to the tariffs not really bringing it down. So it's like this circular nature of like Trump also needing Powell to comply with him to kind of fit into his story.
Yeah. And he's not. And Trump is calling him a stubborn moron.
Yeah.
On Truth Social.
So that's like one thing.
Yeah. And then to the tariff point, Powell basically said that there's still a lot of uncertainty about what consumer prices are going to look like because Trump put all these tariffs on, then there was a pause on the tariffs, and then literally 2 days ago on August 1st, the tariffs resumed. And he also like put new tariffs
on like China and Taiwan.
Yeah.
Exactly. Yeah. And so I think it's super fair of Powell to be like, we don't know how this is going to impact consumer prices. And you had a really interesting point about this too.
Yeah, he said that stores are still working through inventory pre-tariffs, which like basically means that like stores, they have all this stock in their warehouse that they can sell off and that they didn't bring over from China. And so they're still working through selling that off and they don't have to pay the tariffs just yet of bringing over stock into China. And I actually saw this because there was a store that I shop at and like for a little while, like the prices were unaffected. Then like the prices spiked for like a week, but then the tariffs got paused. So then I think they like brought a bunch of like inventory in during the pause, and then now the tariffs are back on, but the prices haven't spiked yet
because they probably still have that inventory.
Yeah,
they're stockpiling right now.
So businesses are playing this like little dance of like, okay, when are we going to bring in the stock and when are we going to wait to bring in the stock? And it makes sense. And so Powell's just calling this out and trying to say, hey, like the tariffs and the tariff uncertainty, the reason why you haven't seen it in the market just yet is because it hasn't baked long enough. But as soon as it bakes long enough, we're going to see that. And I'm not going to preemptively like jump the gun and start to cut the rates. And then the second conversation that I think isn't always had in the media but is pretty relevant is that the US dollar has lost its value in the first half of 2025. Specifically, the dollar index has fallen around 10%. And the dollar index basically measures the value of the US dollar against a basket of like 6 major world currencies. And so we're losing value against like the yen and the euro and the pound. And so central banks worldwide are aggressively buying gold as an alternative to dollar reserves. And so what happens is when the US dollar becomes like less strong, then prices start to go up. So like the cost of purchasing other international goods goes up because your dollar is not as strong, obviously. The dollar's share of the central bank reserves has dropped below 60%, a 2-decade low. And so this is like pretty concerning. And the way that this is all related is that when you cut rates, like when the Fed cuts rates, that obviously weakens the dollar to a certain extent because you're not able to buy bonds and like get that interest or whatever. Anyways, so that it weakens the dollar. And so what Powell's also fighting against is a weak dollar. And so if he starts to cut rates, he starts to weaken the dollar even further. Our dollar is losing purchasing power, and that's another reason for prices to increase. And so we haven't seen the effect yet, but we will.
We will. It's coming.
Yeah, it's coming. So.
Yeah. Wait, yeah. And some people are actually being like so drama. Like the Commerce Secretary said that Powell's torturing America with high rates. Like they're actually being so drama.
Yeah, but what they don't understand is that when you anyways, it's fine.
I feel like they do understand.
They do understand.
Really?
It's like all a little game.
Yeah. I mean, the other part of the dollar declining is because of the BBB, the Big Beautiful Act. And so like when you add debt,
BBB derogatory.
But it's like when you add debt, like, okay, when you print more money, the dollar also loses its value. So that's one thing.
And inflation also goes up.
It's kind of insane how well the markets are doing.
Yeah. And what's even crazier is on the release of the jobs report, which we're about to get into, the dollar index fell by 1.28%, which is the most in this year.
The market crashed too on Friday. Like the market was like NASDAQ was down like 2 or 3%, I think, because of the jobs report.
I know. I was actually so sad because like my portfolio was looking so good from the Figma IPO. And then I was like, oh, what happened? Why is everything else red?
And it was literally the jobs report.
Yeah.
And really quickly, just the other side of like why people want to cut rates, which we touched on, but related to the jobs report, is like their take is that the labor market is deteriorating. And this was before the jobs report even came out. But they basically said that we could proactively hedge against a weakening labor market by cutting rates. And so that was like their main argument that they like came in with, which I guess then the jobs report did come out on Friday and it was looking very bleak. So it's not fully wrong.
Yeah. So going over the job report a little bit. The unemployment rate is 4.2%, slightly higher than last time. The revisions were pretty bad.
Yeah, so basically like the Bureau of Labor Statistics every month comes out with this jobs report that shows the state of the market, how many jobs were added. Mm-hmm. And so this time it was 73,000 jobs in July, which was below market expectations of 109,000. But then like as more data comes in, because they're doing this monthly, so they don't have like all the pieces yet, they go back and revise like previous job data to make sure that they're keeping like an accurate count of how much the market is actually growing, because that's obviously an important metric to have. And so there are always like upwards or downwards revisions to previous months as this data continues to come in. But this time there were 2 downwards revisions of 258,000 jobs, which is like, that's really high. Like we haven't seen numbers that high.
Because it's more than the jobs that they said they added. So doesn't that just make it negative?
It's like since April, we've only added 35,000 jobs, which is like nothing. Like our economy's basically been flat since April.
Yeah.
Yeah. And yeah, it was the biggest 2-month downward revision since April 2020, which was like COVID. So.
Right.
Yeah, and specifically the industries that lost jobs were the federal government, and every other industry remained flat except for healthcare and social assistance. Yeah. So when we talk about the ones that remain flat, it's like manufacturing, construction, retail, transportation, and this makes sense because it's like So then I read a bunch of discourse about how like tariffs affect jobs, and there's a pretty strong historical precedent for like when there's tariffs, the numbers of jobs go down, unemployment goes up. But specifically in this case, what we're seeing is that like because there's uncertainty in tariffs, businesses don't know how to plan for the future, so they kind of just stay put. So that they can like figure out what's going to happen, and then they can, adjust expectations in different directions. And so right now it seems that like people are not committing to XYZ new project that could expand their business because it's like, well, what if we're about to get hit with tariffs and then we need this extra capital on standby to get us through the winter. So I see why.
There's just like so much market uncertainty that it's like it makes sense.
Also, if it's like federal employee employment rates going down, wouldn't that also just be because of like
his
Doge?
Like,
he's just like fired everyone.
That's something from Doge.
He's like mad about his own firing showing up in a jobs report. So mad, in fact, that as we said earlier, he fired the commissioner of the Bureau of Labor Statistics, whose name is Erica I'm so bad at names.
I think it's McAntifer.
Erica McAntifer. Sorry if we're saying her name wrong. Sorry. Anyways,
I didn't know he could fire her.
Well, it appears he can. Yeah. And basically, like the Bureau of Labor Statistics, like we said, is the one that releases these monthly job reports, and they're thought of as apolitical. And she was like a generally bipartisan person. Mm-hmm. Like she wasn't. This isn't like it's not like a liberal like BLS person, which is just Bureau of Labor Statistics.
Well, it's just like it's analytical data. Like how can analytical data have bias in it?
I mean, it can, but like that's not like the point of yeah. And basically, he was like, in my opinion, today's jobs numbers were rigged in order to make the Republicans and me look bad.
And then he also like accused her of crazy things. Like he was like, she was making the jobs numbers look really good so that Kamala could win. Like he was saying all of these things about her that are just unfounded and
but also he's like previously praised the numbers that like she's released when like they look good for him.
Yeah.
Or that like the department's released.
Yeah. He said, surprised. We need accurate job numbers. I have directed my team to fire this Biden political appointee immediately.
It's just like very authoritarian to say that like anything that doesn't show up in your favor is like rigged.
Yeah. And now the deputy commissioner, William Wachowski is the acting commissioner for the BLS.
Yeah, and also like under Trump, they've started deleting like random data sets from the BLS, especially if they relate to ethnicity or like diversity content in terms of like if you're trying to track like Black employment or like Latino employment, like a lot of those data sets apparently like Denise Ross, who's the US chief data scientist until like last year, was like, yeah, I just like went to look for some of the data sets I tracked and they were gone.
Crazy.
So, and like the reason that came up is because people like Trump is really mad that the BLS is like revising their jobs data, even though that's something they always do when like more information comes out. But then like on top of that, people were like, he's made their job way harder by firing a bunch of them, randomly deleting their data, and basically like just like gutting federal agencies across the board.
Yeah, because I think they were one of the ones that got hit harder by his like cuts.
Yeah.
Yeah. So
Anyways, I'm not surprised. But
I mean, honestly, nothing's like surprising anymore, but it's still crazy.
yeah, I was just thinking, I was like, after doing this, I was like, maybe I should wait on investing. I don't know. But then everyone always says you can never time the highs, you can never time the lows.
wait, I actually was thinking that I feel like the market has to go down. Like it's like too good, I think.
I agree, it's too good.
Yeah.
But it is impossible to time at the same time.
I don't
think I'm just like I'll just think about it like for fun.
Yeah.
Like it's not
Like technically investing at all-time highs is still completely fine.
Yeah. Well, it's just like investing usually it's just like investing's better than not.
Yeah.
Even if it's all-time high.
Yeah.
I feel like whenever interest rates do end up getting cut, like the market is going to go crazy.
I also think like
Yeah.
wait, I was thinking about it and I was like, maybe this is why Trump's like so buddy with Jensen, because I feel like Trump cares a lot about the market and kind of sees that as like the ultimate, like the ultimate metric above like jobs or like any of this other stuff, because he can still always like point to stocks.
Yeah.
And like a lot of his like higher income base also cares about that.
Yeah.
Like when tariffs affected
everyone
stuff-
cares about it.
No, like the market doesn't affect the average American the way like jobs do. Like I feel like different economic indicators have like different levels of effects. And like when the market like after tariffs, when the market like crashed, like I feel like a bunch of like people that just have like a lot of money in stocks, which isn't most of the country, was like really upset. Obviously they all like feed into each other. Like I get that, but I'm just saying like I feel like the people that like listen to him like get really upset, or even like crypto will go down. And like maybe that's part of why he's been like more lenient with like Nvidia and stuff.
Anyways, with that, we end our episode.
Bye.
Bye.